Welcome to Rocket Ship, the home of epic React Native content. I'm Simon Grimm, creator of Galaxies.dev, and today's guest is Kim Chouard. I actually listened to a French podcast, so I get the pronunciation for his last name right. So, Kim, thanks for joining me today.
Congratulations. Good to see you, Simon. I'm really excited to be here and to be kicking out on React Native and building stuff.
Yeah, the topic for today is broadly, let's say, universal React Native. You've built a multi-platform game, and we first met at the last app.js, which is quite interesting. So for everyone already, I will put the link to that talk in the show notes. It was called Zero to Music, Building Cross-Platform Games in Months with React Native and Skia. We're definitely going to tackle a couple of those things. But I also want to talk a bit about you first, because when we first met at the app.js, I was looking at the stage and I was looking at you, and you got like a bit long hair, and you were talking about like building a music game, and I got like this, oh, he's like an artist thing vibe from you. And then I did the research for this podcast, and I looked like at LinkedIn, and you have a resume and stuff, and I was like, who is this guy? He's incredible. And so I just got to put this out here. You actually have a mission statement, which I found absolutely great. So Kim's mission statement is, on a lifelong journey to imagine an alternative education approach, leveraging the power of games and technology to empower youth to be fulfilled, kind and critical thinking citizens, motivated to positively impact the world around them. Wow, that really blew me away. And then I also saw you worked at Adobe, you've been at Salesforce, you got like tons of awards, hackathons, innovations, like you led an after school project. So I'm absolutely blown away by everything you have done in your career so far. Maybe you could like quickly tell us just like what were the key moments across all those years for you that brought you to this point?
Thanks, man. Like when you were talking, I was like, "Who is this guy you're talking about?" It was like, it's interesting. You made research, and I forgot about those. And I always get shy because like I like to be humble, and I think it's always good to keep a beginner's mindset. Probably learn that in Silicon Valley, and always challenge yourself as if you were learning something new. So anyway, getting back on track. So I guess I think from the mission statement you shared, the biggest piece for me was um, when and how I got started coding. I got into coding when I was like 10 years old, like hacking around on my PSP with like putting like Russian framework to be able to build custom themes. Eventually, like, build website for local companies in PHP at the time. Fuck, I don't miss this. Pardon my French. And the thing is, like, I was fairly young, but I was really excited about what was going on, and I found a passion, and I was really digging it. So I was loving using my brain. I don't think we say that enough, but coding is actually very creative. Not only because of the outcome, especially in web and now universal, but also you got to be thinking outside of the box to find the solution, and you have to visualize things as you develop them if you want to architect them right. And so I had this thing, and I was like, just loving it. And then when I looked at what was going on at school, I was just sitting my ass looking at someone talking, and I was like, it was working for me, but for some of my friends it was a bit more difficult. I was like, it's not you failing school, it's school failing you. It's like we all have brains, we all have amazing abilities, and so I think that planted the seed in my brain at the time that we should and we can and should do a better job. And so I started like doing some research, eventually studied abroad in different places, and landed in San Francisco, where I started like a little coding club in a local school, and eventually started my first game and got back to France. I joined an alternative school, so I was working in schools as like doing all the after school and IT stuff, and also working with teachers, and that was very intense. So this got me on edge, and I got back to coding after this to more of the tech aspect. And that's where it gets interesting, because I started as a web developer, right? Really fully web. Got into cloud computing when I joined Adobe. They were transitioning from from software based, so selling software, to subscription based with like monthly fees and stuff. And so they had like a huge cloud team that I joined at the time, but it was always web-based. And I had this, little thing on my head. It's like, oh, maybe one day I should try creating mobile apps, but it felt like I'm not going to swear yet, but, difficult enough not to do it, or painful enough. Because if you think about like what I've been able to work on over the past year, and what would that take even 3 or 4 years from now? Building a multi-platform music game is one of the most demanding app you can build because it's all about tempo, it's all about time. So if you have 10 milliseconds delay on your login form, okay, fine. On the game, it's useless. Everything is out of tempo, so you've done everything for nothing. And so if we wanted to build that for web, Android and iOS, it would need like multiple teams, different alignments, different code bases, and I was more a product manager than a developer, so I know what it is to manage multiple things, and it can be hectic. And now I just have one code base. There's just the two of us with another developer in the team, and it's amazing. It's really a great feeling, and it's only the beginning. I have a lot of hope for this community. I think it's gonna blow up. So it's a good time to be coding with all the
Yeah.
AI stuff on top of it too, which you cover in your channel.
Oh yeah, we have to talk about AI at some point today as well. And you already foreshadowed the Odisei app is the app you're building, or what we want to talk about in a second. Just for a moment, like you lived in California, you said I think for 10 years, and I think
Yeah,
probably until like 2020, 2021, something
yeah,
like this.
something
So
like
so
this.
how and when did you come into contact with React Native? Because it was probably already around for like 5 years at that point, and maybe even more present
Man,
in the Silicon Valley. I don't know.
it was there. It was there, but it was not ready. um, there was this thing like there's Electron, I remember, and some like Expo was there too. And through a few hackathons, some of my friends tried it, but I always had mixed echoes, and also it was just a balance. Where do you commit your time? I think I spent 1 or 2 years of my life also being in school, so that means you start coding. I was just commuting a lot, like being with the teams, and it was like a very human and an amazing opportunity, but it was very far from technology. So that's also where I probably lost track. And then I came back. I was, oh shit, oh, this happened, and I saw it become mature because and the opportunity because I'm a musician. I love creating music, and that's also another thing that just echoes with education. I've always listened to a lot of music, so I've DJed a bit, but never really produced per se. So I always wanted to play the drums. My parents told me, okay, great, you're gonna play the drum like that with the guitar, so it's less noisy. So I started with the guitar, fine. Then I moved to San Francisco. I was like, fuck it, I'm on my own place. Got a drum, started learning electronic drums and regular drums. And at the time, there was this tool called Melodix, which, because the drums is electronic, it knows exactly when you hit which drum. So there's some instantaneous feedback, which was amazing. And I think that's probably sparked the idea of what eventually became Odisei Play, what I'm building now. And before the pandemic, I always stick myself to only playing music that were already existing. I didn't feel like I could, or it was just so hard to compose music. And then there's this guy called Andrew Huang, which is a fucking work star, a very great educator, has like one of the biggest music YouTube channel. Highly recommend. And I follow a course of him. Some of it is available on YouTube, like 30 minutes intro to music theory. And then I was like, shit, this is actually simple. It's like the whole of it is complex, but the beginning of it, you can do baby steps and get to it. And because I was already using a lot of software from like Photoshop to coding and stuff, I was familiar with the DAW, which is digital audio workstation, what you do to create music. And so I got started, but it took me fucking 25 years until I eventually realized that I could create music. And I think it's a bummer because it's, it's all in your brain, the barriers you put. And I think with technology, we can help nudge people. Hey, look, you see, you can do this. Oh, you've done it. Congrats. And then, little by little, make them confident and until they realize that they can just do stuff.
Yeah, you said this in like when we talked about the topics for today. You said that like music plays a big role in your life, but it's probably even more important than most people recognize. And I taught myself also to play the guitar like 10, 15 years ago, and then I dropped it at some point because I don't know, it's not really a priority right now. So I have a little daughter, I have like galaxies and all the stuff I do
Oh,
on
nice.
YouTube. So
Cutie.
but I mean, yeah, music is like learning music is incredible, and making your own music is something I definitely like. And maybe I can do it again with Odisei. I actually
Dude.
need to play around with it.
All right,
So
man. I'll send you one of
um,
those so you can get started on the sax.
I would love to. I would love to. So you said something that also made me curious regarding React Native. You said when you got started, there are some major gaps in the tutorial offering for React Native right now. So while you were learning React Native, what were those like major gaps in the beginning? Because
Man.
I think this is like a critical thing. You start something, and I've heard this before. Like it begins with, should I use Community CLI or Expo? I mean, we've kind of settled that debate by now because it's recommended to use Expo, but there's so many things like in the official documentation where beginners are like, what? And then maybe they immediately drop out. Especially you might know this because you have like some teaching vibes to
Yeah,
yourself.
there's this concept called beginners mindset, and also like remembering what it is to be a beginner. And the more advanced you get and the more professional and precise you get, the more you forget what it is. So some concepts you take for granted are very new for beginners, and so it's very challenging. So you're right. But I think the issue we have with React Native and the Expo space right now, which to me is not really an issue, it's just an issue in terms of the learning, is that it's growing very fast. It's mind blowing. I think I've been in the tech space for 20 plus years now, so I've seen things evolve, but the pace at which this tech stack is evolving is ridiculous. And the quality of the people we have in the community, they're very sharp, makes it that every other month you have something big that drops. Like as I was building the game, when I started building the game, I could have not done it. And then eventually things like crystallized, like we talked with William and he dropped some really hot stuff. And then there was some NativeWind that got matured. And it's just like all those things started like piling up. And then Evan drops the Expo router stuff, which for me is huge. Like I come from a web background, so having everything on the client side is just very weird aspect, especially your secrets and all the things that I cherish so much to hide. Now I need to put it in the app that anybody can decompile. What the fuck? So anyway, with Expo router and API routes, things get a bit more stable and it's easy to do it. It's not like a whole mess to create, so it makes it affordable for both ends, both people coming from the web into React Native, but also people that are used to this client only approach. It's just a matter of setting up a few things and then voila, you're ready to go. And so that's it. Like it's just going so fast that even right now, when we're building things, like I was debugging Storybook with Skia and chromatics, and there was some issue with, it's so on edge and so new that we're probably some of the first one to set it up. So there's no tutorials, or luckily now there's some smart LLMs that can help us on the way, but it's very new, and I think that's the thing. So it's one thing to acknowledge the issue, and it's also one thing to understand why. I think the reason why is pretty cool, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't address it. So I'm glad that there's people like you working with Galaxies Dev and all those things.
Yeah, it's interesting you said this because I really love like the whole LLMs. I'm using Cursor for my work now. It's generating a bunch of code, but at the same time, because React Native and Expo is evolving so fast, like many times it's completely wrong code I get because it's just not working anymore. And just
Yeah,
like yesterday, I wanted to build something with like file upload to an Expo API route, and I was like,
yeah,
how does it work? I was Googling it. There was like zero results, really zero. Nobody had
yeah,
ever
bro.
done like form data to Expo
I know.
API route. And I'm like, am I the first one to do this?
Yeah,
Maybe. Yeah. So it's absolutely a strange time, but you still managed to build Odisei. I've seen it. You showcased it at the App.js, at least part
yeah,
of it, and we've
yeah.
mentioned it a couple of times. Maybe we start before we dive into a few of the technologies.
hmm
What is the app about? What is it in general for people who haven't used it or
Yeah, of
seen it?
course. So the interesting piece is, as I mentioned before, I've played different instruments and started composing music. And for my 30th birthday, my friends and family offered me a saxophone. And so I started playing. The beautiful thing about saxophone is that it's loud, but the painful thing with the saxophone is that it's loud. So practicing, when you play, I don't know, like your voice, I'll be, oh, great. And then when you practice your scales, like people are like, oh, boo. Like, dude, if you want me to play this right, I need to practice. So it's hard to find those spots. And that actually goes for most of wind instruments. And so I looked online and I found this beauty here, the treble sax, which is, it's like the size of a bottle. And you can practice silently. It's the same key fingering. So everything you learn, you can apply to your real saxophone. There's a good like analogy. So I received this and I was like, wait, this is amazing. And it's missing something. Like it's missing this, um, counterpart, like a mixture between Duolingo and Guitar Hero, but for saxophone. So I pinged the founder. I told him like, hey, if you ever do it, put me on the beta. And then we started discussing and I guess I'm building it. But the idea is, so as I said, imagine a mixture between Duolingo, which is a great gamified app to learn languages, and Guitar Hero, but for real instruments, which already exist. For piano, there's Simply Piano, a lot of other things like that. For guitar, there's Musician.
Yeah, I've used
For
Musician
drums,
before.
voila. Yeah, when you mentioned you learn on your own pace, I was assuming you use some of it. So most of the instruments actually have been digitalized, but the wind instrument space, it's still very, very acoustic. It's for a lot of reasons. It's hard to digitalize. It's also rooted in culture that are not embracing technology yet. It's looking at things that they see more pristine, let's say. But there's a lot of value there, right? And so for us, the vision with Odisse is really help you practice anytime, anywhere, and help people make more music. As I said, like we can all create music, and we live in a world that's getting a lot and lot more fragmented for a lot of reasons. We feel far from each other, and culture and music helps us connect. And even if we don't live in the same place, we could never talk. Then we listen to music that talks to both of us and share some. I think it's just an amazing way to break walls in between each other. And so that's why I have a lot of faith. So if we can ever help people do more of this and share more and connect more, that's amazing. For us, we're focusing on wind instruments because we see there's a huge gap there. And starting with saxophone, but there's some other things coming. We have a clarinet coming, and all the rest will come. And so the game is like a web and mobile app that it will basically take you from zero to a music expert. So right now we built like the basic course that's going to be released in next month, or this month actually, when this is going to be coming out. And basically we show you how to um, hold your saxophone, which are the keys you blow, and we've tested this and it's ridiculous. Like within 30 minutes from not knowing anything with saxophone, at the end you can play songs. And within an hour you can play with a real like saxophone, which is crazy because you see how many keys there is. I don't know, you don't see. I
A
should put
lot,
the
yeah,
blue
yeah.
one.
If you're watching on
There's,
YouTube, there are a lot of keys. Is it?
there's,
Can you play it? Like, how loud is it? Does it make any noise, or can
yeah,
you
yeah.
just?
There's a little speaker here. There's a built-in synth. There's a speaker which is small, so it's a bit shit, but and so you can
Okay.
play. It's probably better to have it with like a wired headphone. But where it gets interesting is because it's electronic, it's MIDI. I can know exactly which key you press. So first we ask you to press a key, and then you press it, and so there's instant feedback. It's really snappy, and we've made we work very hard so that you don't get bored. Like we really help you get on board, and you don't realize you're spending time. And I think that's where technology can really kick in. Even before we talk about AI, even just some basic stuff, you can really do some powerful thing, and then we can get further. But so rebuilding the basics. Right now it's working with the travel sax. You can play songs, but eventually we're building an audio engine. We can go on a technical aspect on that. I think that might be interesting to recognize and analyze the pitch, so we can recognize when you start playing note and the notes you're playing. Because the last piece on wind instruments is that and I am on the piano, right? I play a do, whatever note I play. This is one example with a specific piano, but on a regular piano, you play a do, you're going to play exactly that note, right? There's no way around it. If you press the right key on the saxophone and you blow, it could go very wrong. There's actually technique to go an octaves higher, but it might not be on the right pitch. So you really need to train your ear to play right. But with such an audio engine, then we can give instant feedback. You can have a line. So not only we show you play this note, but whether you're going off pitch or not, and just there's so many things that we could not even dream about before. But there's still some work to get there.
Yeah, I was when I use musician, there's the same like with the guitar. If you play a string, you also know if it's like too high or too low, and they could show you this. Or when you like tune your guitar, you have like a guitar tuner built in. So I would love to like get back into that technology. What's behind that? Because I have actually no idea how it works, and I was always curious. But before we get into like the deeper technology, maybe what's the general technology stack? Because you said you wanted to build a universal application, a universal game. So what are like the biggest technologies used in your project? Of course, Expo router, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. So just so I give context on why I choose that stack, it's I started this being the only dev designer, and it's a one-man show on the tech aspect to build this. So I was very restricted in the time I had and what I could do. So I needed something that would allow me to be as fast as possible and to as many devices as possible, because the premise of this is to be portable, so you can play in flights, in trains, and when you wait at the doctor appointment. So I could not only do like a web application, right? It needed to be on the phones, and honestly, it's crazy. It's really possible. So what I'm using right now is Expo router to be able to have the deep linking and have the same routing strategy, and also have a backend. It's pushed to Netlify, which is amazing. I really enjoy like their DX experience. Like every time you have a PR, I have my CLI and I make sure that there's no regression, or if it doesn't build, I can track to which commit makes it fail, which could be good because as we said before, we live on the edge. So sometimes errors are not very helpful and they come out of the blue. I'm using NativeWind, sorry. This has been a big, I think without it, it would have been a really difficult, to be honest, because that's one thing that I thought, at least in my perspective, we didn't got right until NativeWind came out and really got mature. Like style sheet, and it's just very challenging to build it right so that it looks right on every platform. But since I switched to NativeWind, it's been crazy. It's just so fast to do it. It works. In my talk on App.js, I show examples on how under the hood it does some reanimated stuff to do some animation that we often take for granted with CSS on the web, So yeah, basically, and Skia. Skia is the biggest thing. Without Skia, nothing would have been possible. The game engine is pretty complex, and again needs to be real time. So I really needed something as performant as possible. And the interesting piece is with what William has built with Skia, you actually get better result than if you would have built in real native code, with some abstraction you had with Atlas and stuff. It's super performant. And so it feels very good to be able to say, hey, it's actually better and faster than real native code. And then one tool that's been very helpful for us too, because of the universal aspect, it's been Storybook. I think it's a great way to, when one of the dev joined the team, he started working on the front end aspect. So we needed to separate a bit things, and it's very, good to work in components, visual component in abstraction. So you don't then get hung up with the complexity of your code and your tech stack. You just look at the results, make it look good, and then you just import it and it works. I think their abstraction is built on some basic concept of React, but it's very powerful. And you can do automatic testing with testing with chromatics too. So basically, for those who don't know, Storybook allows you to do some visual testing on your app, and you have different components. I don't know if I should share any of that eventually, but and then you can do some testing, so you see the difference in between if you do some regression. So maybe it shows you it's a bit slated or no. And actually, funny, I was looking at to do the same because Chromatic is only for web in native, and it turns out there's a new tool coming up that I'm testing right now. So I cannot tell much about it, but the premise is exciting.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Chromatic. I actually haven't used it. I know that many people nowadays like to use Maestro for testing React Native apps. Have you tried that as well? But I think it's probably slightly different than like Storybook and Chromatic testing.
So yeah, Storybook and Chromatic is really UI focused. So it's really testing the visual aspect and not the functional or the functionality piece. I have to be honest. I often slack on the real core testing aspect, and that's something that we're working on now to finesse the test suite. So if you have any recommendation or any tips on what's the best way to test a React Native app, I'm interested
I
because I've
recently
yet
saw a nice React Native cookbook or something with like recipes, but that's also more about like unit tests. So I mean, you can do
yeah,
unit tests. Maestro is more like clicking together of sort of integration tests, probably. Yeah,
Maestro,
probably a
interesting.
combination of. Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? I think there was also a talk at the App.js about it, but I don't know exactly. So you said you have your server or backend on Netlify. Is this just like Expo API
Oh,
routes, or it is a separate server?
everything is in the same server. So basically, that's the beauty of Explorer is it's very well abstracted, I find. You just create your app, you deploy it, and then so your web app runs on the same server than the backend, and your mobile app knows automatically that it needs to reach for that particular endpoint that
Right,
just
through
runs
the
on the same
origin in
server.
the app.js, I think, right?
Yeah, so it's really well done. And I'm also using Supabase for database and storage, which has a really good DX experience. I'm ping-ponging for authentication right now. Historically, we used Firebase and we want to connect with our main website too. And so we've explored using Firebase with Supabase, but it feels like a
Oh,
stretch. Yeah, it's possible, but it's like, well, dude, yeah, it hurts.
yeah, it sounds interesting and challenging. Yeah, I have. I mean, yeah, you have that background because you have people in Firebase and then you want to use them. But yeah, I
I
don't
think
know how well that
yeah,
works.
no, right now after going down that road, I'm like, okay, I might just use Supabase Art. I'll just have to make it work with WordPress somehow. So it's probably simpler than, putting it on top. For now, we'll see.
So diving a bit deeper, as far as we
Hmm.
can, into the technologies, maybe we can start with the audio handling because you mentioned it before.
Putain.
Like,
Let's go, let's
like
go.
first, do you like just use the microphone to get the sound, or do you like plug in the cable and then get like the signal, and how which package is used for
Yeah,
that? And then also the thing we talked about, like how do I recognize like the the note? Is it too high or too
the
low?
pitch.
Yeah, the pitch? How does it work?
Okay, let's break it down into blocks so we can address it one by one. So in audio, there's a lot to talk about and there's a lot missing. So I think that's where I think our community needs to match the most. I'm hoping that eventually we'll be able to contribute in open source too and probably release some package. We need to also mature ourselves and first release the app so we have bandwidth to contribute back. But we're learning a lot, and so I'm excited to share those learning back soon. But basically, there is the audio playing aspect, right? So when you play a song, we need to play the backing track. So there's actually multiple tracks. There's the backing track, the backing vocal, the backing instrument that you play on top, or you can choose to reduce, and the clicks. That's like the metronome that gets you the tempo. And so there's this engine that I'll unbox in a second. Then there is the note detection that could be in two folds. Either it's with a treble sax or MIDI instruments, electronic wind instruments, which means that I'm receiving MIDI signals. The way MIDI works is like there's not on, not off, and then the MIDI number, which is just C and just place it on the piano scale, and also some velocity and other MIDI aspect. For us, that could be done either via USB or via Bluetooth. And you may say, wait, what? Bluetooth is very slow. There's some latency. So how is that even possible? The interesting piece is Bluetooth audio has to carry a lot of data. So in order to make it sync and to make it stable, they need to introduce some delay. I think it's incompressible and it's very unreliable. You don't know. It's not like it's always 20 milliseconds. It's like between 30 to 50, So it's just a big no-no for us. But what we call like just communication data via Bluetooth is very quick. So first, we only send small signals about like the guy pressed the key or he started playing this note. So it's much faster. And so we can do it and it's still real time. So you don't have to connect. You connect with the app via Bluetooth and you start playing. And I'm detecting the note, which key you pressed. So it's instantaneous, which is exciting. And then there is the audio engine, which we're building ourselves. We have to build it from scratch. So I'll probably cover that last. So it's kind of like the different elements that you need to align and make work for the game to really have the right experience you want. Funny enough, the first one was the one that I reworked a bit recently with the help of Cursor. It was very interesting because he pointed me at some interesting piece, and just the pace at which I was able to fix things was very impressive. So yeah, the idea of Cursor, I think Cursor is like an AI based IDE based on Visual Studio Code, which is great. So you don't lose anything, you just add more capabilities. It's been a bit slow for me in terms of performance, but besides that, it's amazing. And they have this composer fitting, which you highlight in your channel. I think a great video for those that haven't watched it. And basically, you can tell him like, here's I want to do something, or you give him some logs about the errors, and he's capable of looking at multiple files and edit them directly, showing you the diff. Where historically we had chat or autocomplete, we had to copy passcode. There was a pain in the butt. But now it's just so much more fluid and just has more context. So it's very powerful. It's also been a bit scary. So I'm very glad that I know what I'm doing, because sometimes it does shit. So you have to keep himself on the toe, and you have to use it, wisely. And so I've been thinking recently, but if I were a new developer and I start developing now, I would use those tools a lot. But I'm trying to wrap my head around how to teach new generation of developer how to code with that not being lazy, but sometimes go the hard way once so they know, and then use those tools to be accelerated, because otherwise it's got to be misused somewhat.
Yeah, I would love to teach it as well, but I found it problematic because the results I get vary as well. Like if I do it, just write, create a file with this purpose, and it just like gives me 5 different versions when I do it 5 times. So it's not reliable. And then I mean, it's helpful if you can use it. It's really helpful. Like set up my app with a tab bar, 5 tabs, boom, boom, boom. It takes like 10 seconds to fill out those things, and it's awesome. But then at other times, it's like I was like, change the styling of my app, and it messed up everything. It introduced a random style, and the import path was wrong all the time. And I don't know. Probably this is like gone in a year. I don't know how fast these AI tools will get better. I mean, they've been getting better all the time. So
I kind of feel bad for GitHub, because they've led the way so much. And now I've just stopped my subscription, and I feel bad because they've given us a lot. So I'm hoping that they eventually catch up, and I'm sure they will.
Oh, that reminds me, I also need to cancel Copilot.
So many AI subscriptions, and so many AI subscriptions, it's ridiculous.
Okay, so coming back to audio, you also said, I think that was at the app.js, you proposed like an Expo audio package. Was there any development in that area? Did anyone reach out to you?
Yeah. We've been discussing. It's only, I think, the Expo 52 right now that's about to come out next month. It's one of their biggest release. I think it's been very challenging technically with the new architecture, and there's just so many moving pieces that, from the consumer perspective, we might not realize, but it's taking a lot of their energy. So there's been a few PR about Expo Audio. So just for context for people, Expo has been provided like a library called Expo AV, which allows you to do audio and video. They recently released Expo Video that separates video and in a more modern API. And the idea is to do the same with audio, right? That has yet to happen. It might get released in alpha in 652, but I'm not too sure. I'm not in Expo team, so I'm just making guess at the moment. Don't take my word for it. But it's in the works, but I don't think we should like plan on it too soon, just because of the size of this particular Expo release. So right now I'm using Expo AV, and it turns out that it's been pretty unreliable, and I just realized why ping-ponging with cursor. So what happened is I have those 4 tracks, let's say, and so I load it into my app. I do the load async function, and then I play it. So there's the aspect to sync in between them and the UI, but the thing is, it was sometimes not loaded. Sometimes it would stop halfway, and I was like, whoa, and it was getting worse and worse. And it turns out that when you load the sound, it just loads the metadata, but not the data itself. And so then when you start playing, it would stream it. For me, it's just no way. I want, like, when you press play, I need everything to be ready, the cooks to be there with all the ingredients and be ready to cook, you know? So cursor, like when I did some big ponging, I sent him some HTTP request results. I thought, oh, okay, that's actually this. You need to cache the thing. Just add the function there, boom, 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 boom. And then I click OK, and then it was just working. Basically, what we do now is we cache the result in a blob that we put in a local URL, and then just use that data. So we know it's always locally available. So that's been a big improvement, but still, I've been playing around with it a lot. So I've built an engine that allows to sync all the tracks between them. The thing is, if it's on sync, you need to resync it, so it might do a little lag. So we had to make it so that it would align on the first merger, beginning of each merger, otherwise, so that it has a little bit of rhythmic aspect. Because if you change the music in the middle of something, oh wait, what the fuck? But if you change at the beginning of each merger, it's pretty well known that you going on a new cycle, so it's more accepted. But what's happening is I have this 30 to 50 milliseconds delay that it's incompressible. I've done all the logging in my life, like performance.now, and like I'm sending it at the right time. I'm sending the right data, but for some reason, it's not being sent to the engine on time. I think they used the web audio and on the web, for example, the web audio kit. And so there's those performance bottleneck that for my use case, it's just been difficult to work with. I think we have a working version, but I want to build something more reliable. And maybe I have a very niche need, but I have a feeling that we can create more music app with React Native, but to do so, we'll have to do more reliable technology. So one thing I really want to explore on the coming month is native modules, you know, probably through Nitro modules, which has been very interesting. It's incredibly fast. For this and the Urgent Engine, I'll talk about in a second. But yeah, so we've been using Expo AV, but we had to hack around it. Here's one other just fun fact. So I play the backing clicks, and then there's a 4-bar countdown, and then I play all the rest. And it was always lagging behind. It was not aligned. So I had to hack around. So I play all the tracks at the beginning, everything muted but the backing clicks. And then when the song starts, I put everything at 0. So at least it's somewhat buffered. So those kind of hacks that I wish that once we can be on the other side and create the library, it'll be more reliable. I've been bitching a lot about Expo AV. I'm still very grateful with that. It being around, I wouldn't have been able to build this app, so I'm very grateful. I'm just highlighting some, shortcomings that hopefully we can solve as a community.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Nitro modules. I was exactly thinking about this when you said like the delay and like preloading files and it's not working. I was thinking of like I talked to Mark before, and he was telling me about this concept of like hybrid objects that live like in JavaScript and in NativeWind. And I was like, maybe you could have like a
Oh
hybrid object
man.
of that like media file, so it's actually like already in native and buffered, and you can instantly access it. So
Yeah, I need to
yeah,
talk to Mark. Mm.
Nitro
Yeah,
could
he's a
be a
cool
way
guy.
forward.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, a lot of opportunities. I'm just not too familiar with it, so I need to dig into it. But yeah, maybe I should work with the Margelo team and we can release something to open source. That'd be nice, I think.
Absolutely. So that's the audio, which was definitely challenging in that app. But you also had to work with Skia. So how did you use
Oh
Skia
putain.
to like to make the app that performant? I think Skia was also a big part of your app.js talk, because
Mm-hmm.
after all, it's not just about like listening and music and stuff. It's still a game basically. And
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of
so
visual involved.
why did
Mm.
you decide to use Skia? Was it like the best thing you could use, or
So when I first looked at it, I went into some Reddit thread. I don't think it's been documented much. More, I see a few videos coming out now, but at the time, 1.5 years ago, there was not that much information about how to build like a real performant game on React Native. So I went into some dark Reddit thread and they were talking about weird stuff. There's this React Native game engine thing, which hasn't been committed for 4 years. I was like, okay, let's know. But nobody really connected the dot, at least publicly, about Skia. Um, but it's a very powerful 2D engine. I think everything about Skia is amazing, but the configuration, that's where I actually spent most of my time. And so we worked a lot with Will to improve the web support and, the configuration and also the documentation, because there's small things that can throw you off for days. So try to give back to make sure people don't get stuck where I was stuck. But basically, what Skia gives you is a canvas on which you can draw with React Native component approach. So you create a rectangle, it's called a rectangle, you give it the axis, you create a circle or whatever. For us, for example, the node is a circle and then a background, and it's the length of the node. And it's hyper efficient. It's tapping directly into Skia engine, which is the rendering engine for Chrome and iOS and Android. So it's just everyone has that in common, but it's not accessible until we had React Native Skia. So that's very exciting. And then what takes this to the next level is the deep integration with Reanimated, right? Because you don't only want to draw things, you also want them to animate and to respond to gesture, and you want that to be free, right? You want that to be feel as natural as possible. And the one that really does that best is Reanimated, not only because how they handle gesture, but also because there's a lot of people cooking in the GS thread. So it often gets a bottleneck. So it can get stuck. If the UI still moves, the end result might be okay. But if the UI lags, it's probably the worst place you want to be, because from the end user, you see that it's slow and you're like, oh, this is a bad user experience. But the beauty of what they've done with Reanimated is with a simple abstraction, they just gave you access to the UI thread that's normally accessible in all native apps. And it's very powerful because then you can run at 60 FPS and it's just incredible. And so when you connect that with Skia, you're able to not only render with those very high level abstraction that are very easy to use, but animate them in a way that's just super quick. And that works across the board from iOS, Android, and web and other native platform, which is exciting. I think the challenge that we had for the web is that we had to download a WebAssembly file to be able to draw, which was pretty big. But with V1, William released the GS abstraction, which is a direct tapping into the web browser API on Skia. So it's only like 21 kilobytes, something, which is ridiculous. So it's really like pretty much at no cost. Does that make sense? I don't know if I was clear what I explained.
Yeah. I mean, I've used Skia a bit before. I was always, I don't know. I mean, I think it's great, but for me, it was sometimes a bit too low level. You know, when I look at
I
William's
know.
demos on YouTube, it's like, what is he
Okay.
doing? This is a different language. It
So
feels like I'm learning C# or something.
yeah,
It looks so different, and like I could take a whole semester of mathematics to just like understand what William is doing to do stuff.
so that's
So
the thing
I
with
feel like
William
there's
is
like one piece probably missing that we might see in the future that like sits on top of React Native Skia. I don't know.
um,
And it's, by the
it's
way,
very
addition.
interesting.
It's the same for his new the web GPU stuff he
Oh
announced. Like
yeah,
web
that's another
GPU
topic.
and those demos, like you write, I don't know, 100 lines of code to have a rectangle on the screen, and I'm like, what is this? So
So okay, let's brush on this for a second. I think it's very interesting. I really agree with your perspective. I just want to maybe give a different, slightly different angle. So first, I want to acknowledge that also William is probably too good in that sometimes you just testing and it's like, whoa, wait, where did that happen? And you could spend like an hour understanding what happened in 10 seconds in his screen. But to his defense, I think a beautiful thing about Skia is that you can stay very high level with those component based, approach and do a lot. Basically, most of my interface is just using React components that come from Skia. But you can go really, really deep if you want to, tapping into shaders and stuff, which is slightly 3D. And now with his 3D library, you can really go deep. And I think if you ever touch on 3D, it's just very intense. And so I think the audience for that particular thing, it's probably a bit different. It's a new audience. It's a new group of people. Like people have been doing that their whole life and building shaders and 3D scenes and stuff. And it's very complicated. So that makes it a bit easier, at least because all the building blocks on how you create 3D scenes is complex because there's so many that like the lightning, like the object, the texture of the object. It's hard to abstract this. So what William has done is not simplify how to create that scene because it's almost like another job. It's really how do you bring those scenes in our platform? Because before it was really complicated. You had to, if not impossible, like the talk from the Starlink app is genius. Really, I highly recommend it. But what he had to do to get there was pretty intense. And so now with Filament from Margelo and what William is doing, I think it gets easier. But we haven't simplified the 3D because I think it's very hard. Maybe one day we will, but it's almost a different mission, if you know what I mean. So hopefully that helps, but it's challenging.
Absolutely. I also don't meant to say that William's stuff isn't good. Like
No, of course.
his stuff is amazing, and the work he's doing is amazing as well. It's just like for an outsider who hasn't touched it, it feels really hard sometimes.
It is.
It's not like I'm teaching a flat list and a scroll view, and that stuff is quite easy to use. You put in a couple of lines and then you see something on the screen, but it's different for React Native Skia and like 3D stuff.
Yeah. I agree. I think one thing I'm dreaming about, and I've been ping-ponging a bit with Will, and since I met him, is, if you go to the Reanimated doc, they have some interactive guides that are very powerful. I think if we can build a tutorial that would teach 3D concepts and how to use some of those libraries in a more interactive manner, I think we can make a lot of aha moment because it's so abstract that you need to see the result, and when you see the result and you play around, then little by little it's simmers. But yeah, I haven't seen that. Maybe that exists because it's also things that we do for other web thing. But maybe something we should play around with Will.
It would also be funny to have like based on React Native Skia and Web GPU and all these 2D and 3D advancements to one day have like a React Native game engine that like. Probably not in the scale of Unity, but I mean, it's possible that you put a wrapper around this and like add some ease to bring in like textures and different things and make it easier to create like a game scene, really like opting into the main set of like a game. Maybe in the future, why not?
Okay, I like this. I think the game engine has a lot to it. It's just, but I like this. Let's keep that spinning on the back because like I think there's two things I want to dig into, which is the Nitro modules and real modules, and also 3D. So let's keep talking about this because I don't know if we'll get to the game engine fully because there's so many aspects, but at least some basic 3D and some abstraction would be interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not probably not going to do it. I'm not smart enough to figure out such a game engine, but we have so many like super smart minds in the React Native community. If they're not debating on Twitter about like who has done something,
Whether you use Tailwind or not.
yeah. I'm pretty sure like one day we're gonna see something cool. Okay, so we've touched on audio, we've touched on Skia, we talked about NativeWind. By the way, which version of NativeWind did you use?
V4. I've never touched V2. Is that the question?
Yeah. Because like
No.
it's
I
not
went
still
straight
not
on
stable
V4.
release. It's
It's
I don't know.
it's soon to be stable. I think they invested a lot of time in it. There was discussion on whether to make that default as in the new Expo router, which comes for free basically. So it's a default, meaning you can use it, but if you don't, it's not gonna add any more things. I think it's fucking genius. So I hope they do it. So it's close to be very stable. But even if it's not branded as stable, I've been using it and I have no issue pushing to prod with this. It's good. It's good.
Yeah. To be honest, I mean, when this episode goes live, it's like probably already what's November or something. And I've been basically since early September waiting on the V4 release. They said like next week, and then it was silence. And then I reached out to Mark late. Yeah, they released a bit, but not like the stable version. And like if you install NativeWind, you will still get like the previous one. You have to install it with Next or something.
This is painful. I think they should change the current tag and just get over with
it. But I talked to Dan and to Mark, and I think they encountered some like major blocker again, which is occupying them, and they don't want to like.
They'll make it through. We're
mess up
sending
the
them
100,000
positive
installations.
Yeah. They'll make it through.
They will absolutely make it through.
Yeah, this I'm not too worried, but yeah, the audio space we need more hands in it. Because the last piece I haven't touched upon on the music, different aspect we need to cover for the app was the audio recognition engine. So when we got started, we worked with the university in Barcelona, because Odisse is a Spanish company. When we got started, we had the discussion like, okay, should we make this more as like an algorithm, more math based, or should we make it more as like a model, like neural networks and AI based? Because of the real time nature, we choose to go with the algorithmic approach for now, which turned out to work really well for us. And so there's this library called Essentia that this the university has developed that they built upon. And I wanted to echo with what you said before about musician and detecting pitch. So we have a lot of very good algorithms to detect pitch now, and that's fairly easy to create something that detect pitch. But the challenge when you want to really have a complete audio engine is to detect what we call not on and not off. So when the not starts and when the not stops, it's challenging to get it right because there's a lot of things that can take into account and whether it's a different not or no. And so right now we're pretty good on not on, which is the most important, but not off is a bit lagging. It's taking a bit time to detect that, okay, it's done. Especially because if you think about saxophone, it's probably, the good news is it's monophonic. There's only one note at a time. So that simplifies a lot. But beside this, there's a lot of harmonies that gets in the saxophone. There's a lot of different frequencies that layers on top of each other. That's what makes the sound so beautiful and complex, but also could, mess around with the algorithm. And so we have this library right now. I've compiled it into WebAssembly for web. So I have like a beta version that I'm tweaking around with. And we need to bring that to native. So that's why I don't know exactly yet. I'm hoping we'll be able to do that through neutral modules. But I don't know. Like, there's been discussion about using Juice, which is like an audio library, but it feels like an overkill. So if anybody in the community has some knowledge and is interested to get involved, I think there's a lot to do there.
It sounds very challenging as well. I never thought about it, but yeah, doing it in real time, the node on and node off stuff. I can imagine like Also, like when you play a guitar string, like it
Mm.
probably starts instantly, but then it fades out like very slowly. So when is the end of
Exactly.
it? And
Yeah. When do
it's,
exactly? Hmm.
it's,
If you
it's
look,
a
you probably all seen like what we call sound waves. So there's the audio aspect, but there's a representation that can be represented differently. But there's starts shaking and then it gets bigger. But then when is the beginning? And it's interesting.
we could probably talk for hours about music theory as well here, but we're coming to an end. Our
Yeah.
time is running out. I just had one last question because I think somewhere you also said that you feel like people should develop with a web first React Native approach in the future, which is probably also in the direction of universal React Native. So
Hmm.
why do you think that's the case? Because most people I know still say, hey, I use React Native for iOS and Android. And why should we use like web? We already come from the web. We want native. So why should we now turn around the whole thing?
That's a great question. So a couple of things. So you said we all come from the web. I think there's also a big part of the community that started in mobile. And so the point I want to make with this statement is taking into account the context we're in. And I think a lot of our community is also coming just for the mobile background. And web is so ubiquitous and powerful and has so many reach. And with the technology we're using, being React based, there's so much in common that I think we're very close to being in the same, house, and that's the same family. And so that's why I've been very excited to see some of the approach that people in the community have been taking, whether Will that use the web API and bring it into native, and Mardello and Software Mention too, um, because things in the web have been working for a while, and not everything is perfect. There's some crappy stuff there, but it's been tested a lot and it's been proven efficient. So I think there's some value in like instead of reinventing the wheel, capitalizing on the tests, failures, and success that has been going on, and just build on it. Especially because we're so close already, um, and that would give us even more people to be able to develop in it because they don't have to learn it again. It's like I'm very glad that the European Union forced iPhone to have a USB-C instead of a Lightning because it's simpler and it just simplifies things. That's why I was saying before that I have a lot of I'm really excited for this community, the React Native community. Again, I'm very new to it. I've started I got into it last year, and being able to go in Krakow and AppJS was very interesting because out of all of the dev community I've seen, I found it very passionate and very caring. Like people care about each other and they want to do things right, but there's not too much ego. I feel it's really about the love of the end product, which reminds me a bit the birth of Silicon Valley and some mindset there, which I really loved. So it's really powerful. Soon we'll be able to merge and to have this really universal approach, and a lot of people are going to come along. I'm both excited and not excited because I like the size of our community right now. It's small enough that we can really build together. So hopefully we can keep this friendly and passionate approach as we grow.
Yeah, that's actually pretty nice last words, just like your mission statement. And I completely agree. The React Native community is epic. And while I also think it's great to grow it, I never thought about like what happens if it really grows a lot. Like, is it getting worse at some point? Because right now, I agree that it also kind of feels familiar. Like 5 to let's say 20 people who are doing certain things. Like Jamin from Ignite. Magello. William Candillan. And then a couple of other companies doing big stuff and like some contributing to Mac OS and Windows, some contributing to like Vision OS.
TV,
like everyone is like these islands of knowledge. Yeah, I don't know what happens when we bring in like 10 million web developers more than then suddenly play around with React Native. I don't know. Maybe we're gonna see it one day. Silicon Valley is also still alive, so React Native will also be alive then.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a strong community, so I'm sure we'll be able to keep this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kim, for sharing some insights into your application. Where can people find your application if they want to play the Travel 6 or try out Odisei?
OdisseMusic.com. Hopefully by the time this go live or a few weeks later, you'll see the landing page and then you'll be able to play around. Play.odissemusic.com. It's going to be web for now. We're going to release it in beta, so we hear from people and we learn. The idea is you get it for free when you get a travel sax. So you can actually get a travel sax if you don't know anything about saxophone, but has been wanting to do it for years. Now is the time. And then in January, we will release things in our platform. It's going to be great and beautiful.
That's awesome. So I will put the links to all of this, of course, in the show notes. Also, again, to your App.js talk for everyone interested. That was a great combination of a couple of concepts we touched upon. And also, if you're interested in working on the Expo audio module with Kim, then reach out to Kim on Twitter or X. Link will be in the show notes. So thanks, Kim, and all the best for Odisei.
Take care, guys. Keep building.
Bye. Thanks for joining today's episode. My goal is to share interesting stories and insights into the world of React Native development. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. And on Spotify and Apple, you can leave up to a 5-star review. Because podcasts, and especially niche podcasts like this, are hard to find, subscribing and leaving a review does help me a lot. On top of that, check out my React Native courses on galaxies.dev that cover a variety of topics from getting started to building and publishing your mobile app. Finally, you can share today's episode with a friend or colleague who would enjoy the topic of the show. If you have any questions or ideas for future episodes, find me on X or leave a comment on YouTube. And last but not least, thank you for listening and happy coding, Simon.